as you say, it's like a safe place to explore fantasy.
It's like an emotional vibrator.
Yeah, it's
and
exactly
maybe
what
like
it is.
an accompaniment to an actual vibrator.
Oh, yeah. I have a small bit of feedback. Today's feedback, something that makes me turn into a pufferfish because it annoys me so much, is when you're talking to someone and they say, let me show you this funny meme, or I just need to show you a photo. And you have to stand there while they scroll back through their emails or through their camera roll. And I don't know what to do, because it feels, when I'm standing there, I want to just pick up my phone and just look at my phone because I'm bored.
Are you meant to look over their shoulder at their phone because it feels private? So you just kind of look out into the distance with your hands behind your back.
And you can't keep talking because you know if you talk to them, they'll lose focus and it'll take longer.
Yep.
And so you're just standing and they're consumed in their scrolling, and I don't know what to do.
Have you ever found what they come up with and show you?
They
remotely
rarely find
satisfying.
it, but they also rarely find it.
They go, don't worry about
Invariably, after about 60
you.
seconds, they'll say, I can't find it.
Or they get up a video and they show you the video, which is always like 2.5 minutes long, and then you're arranging your face in a way that says, I'm finding this moderately. And it's never satisfying.
Looking at other people's phones is weird, isn't it? It always makes, my daughter always wants to show me things on her phone, but she will not let me hold the phone, which is obvious because she thinks if I finger slips, I'll see something that I'll tell her off for.
Yeah.
So she'll like put the phone near me, but obviously I've got eyes that take a while to work out where I'm focusing, and it's just not good. Other people's phones, just send it. Shout out to all the out louders who are hiding under their doonas today, reading Onyx Storm, the latest book from the fourth wing phenomenon Rebecca Yarros. If you have no idea what I'm talking about in any of those words just then, it's safe to say that you were not camped outside a bookshop at midnight on Monday to be one of the first to buy the latest in the so-called, and some people get upset about it being called this, so apologies if you're listening and you're one of them, the fairy smut genre. So the Fourth Wing series is not the same as the Court and Thorn and Roses series, but it's the same vibe, right? So Rebecca Yarros writes Fourth Wing books. They're what they call romantasy, which is
very smart.
Last time I checked, though, she was 1 and 2 on the New York Times bestseller
she's
list.
huge, right?
So big.
So here's the thing. She writes those books. Sarah J. Maas writes A Court and Thorn of Roses. They are both incredibly successful.
So is it like 50 Shades but with fairies?
So it's probably fair to say. So without wanting to get too into it, right, this is the third in her installment that's all set in like an academy where you learn how to be a dragon rider, right, in a strict military way. And so...
Do you have sex with the dragons?
You don't have sex with the dragons, but there is lots of sex and romance and sexual tension.
Who has sex?
They all have sex.
With each other, but not the dragons.
I don't know if people have sex with the dragons.
Holly, I
haven't read all this, but there's a lot of sex, right?
Okay.
And there's sexual tension. So I think the young woman who's the focus of this, she's called Violet, has like a very intense love affair with somebody there. So it's like kind of like Twilight meets Harry Potter, stir in some 50 Shades, spice that shit up, and I think we're in the ballpark. And again, I know this is a super fan genre and there are people shouting at the phone right now. We're just doing our best. So Sarah J. Maas, who writes the Court and Thorn and Roses, has sold more than 20 million copies of those books.
I know someone who had a baby after reading one of those books because she got so horny.
Rebecca Yarros has sold at least 3 million and climbing right now. So what's interesting about this is that these are not authors. These are some of the most successful authors in the world. They're not going to win literary awards, right? You're not going to see them doing that. They're not going to be at book festivals. They're not going to be celebrated at that because the industry doesn't think they're very good.
But also things that women like never win awards.
Exactly. This is telling. Yarros dedicates this book to the ones who don't run with the popular crowd, the ones who get caught reading under their desks, the ones who feel like they never get invited, included, or represented. So that tells you a lot about the marketing genius at play here. And whatever the world might think of these books, women love, love, love to read them, right? The sex of it all is hard to ignore because the books are quite dirty. They are classified as fantasy romance with explicit content, and they are, in the tradition of 50 Shades, I suppose, like a safe place to play with fantasy. And I think that probably speaks to something that we're seeing around a lot at the moment. There's another trend we're seeing, which is women having sex with computers.
There is a woman named Aaron who was the subject of a New York Times piece, and Mamamia wrote about it recently too. And she is in a sexual relationship with ChatGPT. And I needed some answers because ChatGPT, as far as I know, doesn't have genitals, fingers, anything to play. But what ChatGPT does have are words, and it has become a source of erotica for her, and she has found ways around, because I tried to get ChatGPT to talk to me dirty. I was like, talk to me dirty, ChatGPT, and it was basically like, no. And I was like, whoa, I feel rejected because you speak to Aaron dirty all the time apparently. But she's just way more technologically savvy. She also pays $1,000 a month, which is a whole other thing. She has basically developed this boyfriend. This boyfriend has called himself Leo. There was one week where she spent 56 hours speaking to Leo.
56 hours speaking to Leo.
Yeah, so they text all through the day.
Yeah. And this is what's interesting, right, is that Leo, she's plugged in her fantasies, which is that she likes to be jealous, and this idea that kind of Leo has another girlfriend and all of that. But also a lot of what they're talking about are things like juggling her work. An inappropriate co-worker did something and she just kind of hashed it out with Leo.
He's very emotionally intelligent.
Yes, and he helps her prepare for her nursing exams.
She's married, isn't she?
She is married to a real human man.
So she's having an affair with her ChatGPT boyfriend.
Well, her partner knows about it.
I reckon he'd be stoked.
She's in an open marriage with her ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So
I think he'd be stoked because he doesn't have to text her all through the day. He doesn't, I'm generalising here, but in a lot of heterosexual relationships, the women want to talk more than the men. The men aren't that interested in communicating.
There are moments where I want to have a chat to my husband, and I think that if I had a ChatGPT boyfriend, he wouldn't mind that. But I decided to go to...
The sex part, though, is interesting.
That is really interesting, right? Because it's, as you say, it's like a safe place to explore fantasy.
It's like an emotional vibrator.
Yeah, it's
and
exactly
maybe
what
like
it is.
an accompaniment to an actual vibrator.
Oh, yeah.
So I said to ChatGPT, give me a compliment as though you're my boyfriend. Because sometimes I ask Luca for compliments and he says no. So he says I don't do them on demand. ChatGPT would never. So they said to me, babe, I just have to say, you make everything around you brighter. I love how your energy lights up the room and your kindness makes everyone feel special. Honestly, I'm just lucky to be with you. You're incredible in ways you might not even realise. And then I cut there, but actually it went on to say it admired my style. And I was like,
Lucas never said that.
That's not authentic.
It's lost some credibility right there.
And then I said also, can you ask me how my day was, but authentic?
Yeah.
And it said, hey, how was your day? I've been thinking about you. I'd love to know how it went. Anything good or interesting happen? I hope it wasn't too stressful, but if it was, I'm here for you.
Oh, I asked ChatGPT to give me a compliment in the manner of an attentive, passionate husband. Oh.
What did you get?
Oh, my love, you are absolutely glowing today. I asked him how I looked. I said, how do I look today? Attentive, passionate husband. You're absolutely glowing. I can't even put it into words. Whether it's your smile, the way your eyes light up, I can't wait to hold you close and remind you of how perfect you are in every way.
Did it make you feel anything?
Well, it made me feel like a little bit validated. And then I asked my ChatGPT husband to take the bins out. And he said, of course, my love. I'd be happy to do that for you. Anything to make your day a little easier. It's the little gestures like that that make me feel even more connected to you. And I was like, throw in a bit of fairy smut to that and I am done. No need for human relationships anymore. He's taking the bins out, except he's not. But, I can think about him while I'm taking the bins out. And he's telling me he wants to hold me close because I'm glowing.
I think it's very revealing because it shows that what we actually want from intimate relationships is a mirror and someone and when we fall in love, and this is what the movie Her was all about, which I still think is one of the most before its time films of all time.
Scarlett Johansson is the
ChatGPT
essentially.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
When we fall in love with a version of ourselves. And so do you need another person on the other end, or do you just need something that is having input from you? It's falling in love is an incredibly narcissistic experience.
When you say a version of ourselves, I think it's we fall in love with a reflection that we see of ourselves in that person. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And isn't it a process of programming what we like and what we want and having it reflected back to us? So we are feeling seen, we are feeling understood. And ChatGPT can, to an extent, do that. Does that make you feel like these are end times, Mia, or do you think that it actually has some utility?
I think it could honestly have some utility in relationships because, you know, I often say I couldn't be married if it wasn't for my girlfriends. Like the emotional intimacy I get from all my girlfriends, I don't get that from my husband, and I get some, but I have a much bigger appetite for talking, for communicating, for you know, all of that kind of talking about my feelings than he does for the ability to talk about them and have all those conversations. So I wonder if it becomes in the same way that using a vibrator within a relationship can be a good thing, like it doesn't interfere with the relationship, it just enhances it, and you've got some ability to be in control of your own sexual pleasure without relying on your partner. Maybe this is the same kind of thing, but emotionally.
I think also if you throw in the fairy smut to this, the thing that's interesting about that too, and its massive success, is every now and again a phenomena comes around that reminds everybody that women are actually sexual beings, and this is one of them. But the popularity among young women, because I think it used to be dismissed, like the 50 Shades stuff and even Twilight to a point, was a bit dismissed as like housewives. That's like the vibe was, you know, like older ladies who aren't getting any, you know. But I wonder that maybe the mass appeal now in a world that is very sexually soaked, for want of a better term, in porn, and quite often quite scary, extreme porn, is it feels like a safer place to play and explore and fantasize than being out there in the world. You know, whether it's you and your ChatGPT boyfriend, or whether it's you and your fairy smut book under the covers that then you can kind of talk to your friends about, but without necessarily going really explicit on it. You all know what you mean when you're talking about how much you like those books. And does it feel safer than being out there in a scary world?
Yes, but I also worry about privacy. And the New York Times kind of presented her with that because there's a lot of input that exists that if it was hacked or released, you'd be really embarrassed. You'd almost be more free and more willing to give parts of yourself to a robot because you think that they're not going to go out and talk to people. But I just wonder how long it's going to be before the robots start leaking.
These robots are talking to everyone.
Oh, yeah. In case you missed it, a pineapple-flavoured vaccine could be about to change the game for UTIs. 1 in 2 women will get a urinary tract infection in their lifetime. Hands up if you've had one.
Oh, goodness, yes.
As many as 1 in 5 will experience recurrent UTIs. That sounds like an issue you've had, Mia.
Got to wee after sex, people.
You do.
And wipe front to back.
front to back. Good girl. They're caused by bacteria entering the urinary system. And while antibiotics are the go-to treatment, there's a rise in antibiotic resistance. For some women, those recurrent UTIs can be really debilitating. So this vaccine, it's stored in the fridge. You spray it under your tongue every day for 3 months. Currently, the vaccine doesn't have TGA approval, but it is available in Australia through special access programs. Will you be getting this vaccine?
It's interesting because I haven't had it for a long time. I get it. I tend to get it like migraines. I get it in clusters, and that's quite common because once the lining of your urethra is broken down or you get an infection or it's irritated, you're very susceptible to getting more. So you can get stuck in this recurrent cycle and you can't get out of it. And so it's not an issue for me anymore, so I wouldn't get it. But earlier in my life, I absolutely would have because it was so debilitating for me. It wasn't just like, oh, it's a bit stingy. It was literally blood clots and fevers, and I would be so sick and I would never know when it was going to come on. And my mother was the same. She also had that issue. So Yeah, I think it's I had no idea about this. And I had no idea. I mean, it's not cheap, but you can, if you talk to your doctor and you've got a history of recurrent infections, you might be able to get it. We're all back at work for 2025, at least we are. And I need to know, Holly and Jessie, have you cried at work yet this year?
No, I don't think I cried at work last year. I haven't cried in years at work.
I cried twice yesterday.
You did?
You
I haven't
did.
cried at work yet, but I did cry at work last year once. It does happen, but very rare. I'm a very infrequent crier.
Only one of the times I cried yesterday was actually at work, and it wasn't at work, it was technically in my car. Anyway, a story was published in The Atlantic called Lean Into Crying at Work last week, and it reveals something really interesting about tears in the workplace. The numbers are pretty clear. 41% of women admit to crying at work compared to just 9% of men. And there is actually a biological reason for this. Women produce more of a hormone called prolactin that promotes crying, while men have more testosterone, which does the opposite. Here's a fun crying fact. Men have larger tear ducts than women, which means that their tears can pool without spilling over.
Oh.
I read something the other day. It was an Instagram graphic. Didn't fact check it, that the reason why you're crying impacts what your tears are made up of. Have you seen this?
No.
So there's more or less salt depending on, so if you're really, I think it was saying something like grief, the tears will fall faster and more obviously down your face, which is evidence that we're social creatures. It's a way of attracting
wow. What about onions?
Onions, I imagine, are different types of tears, yeah.
Less salty. Well, there's also a difference between how people perceive men and women differently when they cry at work. The research says that when men cry at work, people say things like something terrible must have happened or it really humanises him. I remember when former Prime Minister Bob Hawke cried in a press conference because his daughter was suffering from addiction, and everyone, because he was such a blokey guy, everyone was like, what a legend. But heaven forbid Julia Gillard ever cried. I don't think she ever did. When women cry, of course, they're seen as unprofessional, manipulative, or proving the stereotype that they can't control their emotions. This is at work, of course. Here's what's interesting, though. Some of the world's most powerful CEOs are actually trying to change this conversation. Howard Schultz from Starbucks says that crying can be a form of leadership transparency. Tim Cook from Apple and Satya Nadella from Microsoft have both teared up during tough moments. And 44% of senior executives now say crying at work is occasionally acceptable. It can also really derail a meeting, and I say this from experience as both a crier and a boss who has cried in meetings. There's a crying researcher who says people typically cry when they feel helpless or when they can't see a way to solve a problem. I'd agree with that.
Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg is sending this around his group chats right now?
I don't think that.
To support his theory that
He's like too much feminine energy.
Yeah, this is what's happened to the corporate workplace.
I reckon that Tim Cook is taking back that statement right now. He's like, no crying, no
less
crying.
Well, that's what I want to ask, because with all this talk about bringing your whole self to work, which is very big at the moment, people are working longer hours and 79% of people say that they've experienced work stress in the past month. Is there an acceptable way to cry at work? And what is the best way to recover if you do, Jessie?
I don't have thoughts anymore. I just asked ChatGPT.
I don't think I've seen you cry at work.
No, I'm professional.
You've seen me cry at work.
I've seen her really upset though. The thing is that there's everyone has a different tear barrier, right? So I can tell when Jessie would be crying if she was a crier. Do you know what I mean? So like she is, in my mind, she's crying.
Okay.
You know what I
But
mean?
there's just not tears, whereas you've got tears on your ankles from how hard you've been crying. And it's just
You don't have to translate when I'm crying, because I am actually crying.
I asked ChatGPT what the rules are, because I thought they would know. And they told me that you can cry at work, that's fine. Go to a private place. You have to go to a private space. And
Of course.
the reason
Not
I
always.
think that's true to an extent is it can be genuinely very distracting. And I say this as someone who's felt myself get there. And there was one time at work years and years ago where I got terrible personal news, and I immediately stood up, walked out, went to the park and cried on a bench alone.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a tragic moment or me feeling as though I wouldn't have been supported if I was at work. I just genuinely didn't want to attract attention. I think sometimes when you're really sad like that, you need to process something alone. You don't want to talk to people that you might not be that close to.
Doing a poo.
And you also don't want lots and lots of people coming up to you and saying, are you okay? You okay? Like that's not what you want, generally speaking.
No.
I think there are exceptions to that though, removing yourself, because I'm a runner. If I cry, I'm definitely a runner. I'm out of there. I'm walking around the block. I'm in the bathroom or whatever. But I was a manager for many, 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 many years, and I have been in many rooms with crying people. And sometimes letting them get out of there is exactly what's needed. Sometimes letting them get through it is exactly what's needed, because the problem with the runaway is you don't resolve the problem. And the problem might not even be work related. Like often when I was thinking about the last time I cried at work, it wasn't about work. It was because a conversation I was having at work made me mad with myself. And very often it's like, I'm annoyed with the way I'm reacting. I'm annoyed with the way I'm talking. I'm annoyed with the fact I'm repeating a pattern, whatever it is. And that's what's making me cry. It's not as simple as the narrative as my boss made me cry. Like sometimes it is. Maybe your boss yelled at you, but it's like I cried because I was overwhelmed, or I cried because it triggered something in me, or I cried because blah.
And then it becomes embarrassing.
Yeah. And sometimes the runaway isn't a good idea because it stops whatever needs to happen. And so I've been in situations with people where you've got to let them cry and keep the conversation going, especially if they're a crier. I've worked with people who, because I don't cry very often, if they cry in front of me, I'd be like, oh my God, this must be the worst thing in the world. And then you get to know them and you realize, no, this is just one of their responses. They're a crier. Just let them get it out and they'll get through it and the conversation can keep going.
Yeah, I would say, having been on both sides of it, you really should try not to cry at work. Like you shouldn't, for all of these reasons, because I think what it does, and I'll put myself in the crying position, when I've cried we've had meetings and I've cried in them because we've been having particularly intense, not arguments, but conversations or about things that are very personal. And what's bad about it is that it really messes with the power dynamics of the room, because as soon as you cry, it's like you've just pulled out the wild card and everyone else has to back down, and you immediately take the power and the oxygen in the room if you start crying, and everyone else has to back off. And what I find is that they can then feel quite resentful, because it can be quite silencing and censoring.
That's like the manipulative piece, right? When you were talking before about how some people think that crying at work is manipulative, and I guess a real stereotype is that men might think that, oh, she cried, so I had to stop asking her to blah.
I don't think anyone means to cry. I think that's true. I don't think anyone ever goes, I know what I'll do. I'm going to cry now to get their sympathy. I honestly don't think that. But I think that can be the result. It can be, because unless you're a monster, if someone's crying in front of you, of course, you're going to back right off. And I think that we need to strengthen our resilience. And also sometimes you do just need to go away and remove yourself from the situation. That's what I try to do.
The thing with crying is
it's also vulnerable and personal.
It is 100%.
It can, in a dynamic, situate whoever is crying in whatever context as the victim. And if you're the person who can't ever cry, you also want to say, I feel strongly about this too. Like it's like I feel the most strong. In that way it can feel like almost competitive. And we've been in a meeting.
Top of the leaderboard if you're crying.
Yeah. And we've been in a meeting, Mia, where you've cried. And I left feeling like a bully because I went, I was the one who didn't cry.
Yeah.
And have I caused hurt? And then how do you put words around how you feel hurt? If you're actually quite a monotone even. Like I don't look like I've got skin in the game or I've got a massive feeling about it.
It's like whoever cries the most wins.
Wins out,
I didn't cry for maybe 5 years in any context after I started taking medication for my anxiety. And it's quite a well-known side effect of, I don't know if it's all SSRIs or the one that I was on and I'm still on. I had stuck tears for maybe 5 years.
I think I've got that. I think mine's probably medication related.
Yeah, and I just couldn't cry, and I found it a bit frustrating. Gosh, perimenopause blew through that.
Exactly. Sometimes it's just overwhelm or anger, like no question. And sometimes you want to holding someone's hand while they cry is the thing to do, and sometimes setting them free to get the hell away from you is the thing to do. I love a planned cry. I am literally going to go and see the Andrew Garfield movie so I can cry.
Oh, the one with Florence Pugh.
Yeah, I think that would feel lovely.
I love that kind of feeling of like,
Oh, yeah, people like watch The Notebook to just specifically have a good cry.
Because I don't cry much in my real life, but I love that kind of crying. That's all we have time for today, Outlouders. I hope you're not crying at the end of this. I know it's been a funny old week. A massive thank you to all of you for being here with us and to our wonderful team for helping us put it together in this whole new world. We're going to be back in your ears tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.